What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel where today we have our top starts of the week for week 3 of this fantasy season. Now, I know that I was doing just quarterbacks before, but I was doing research for over 24 hours and it was taking a lot for me to be able to release this video. And I wasn't able to talk about the running backs, the tight ends, the receivers. So I figured I might as well just start doing it from now on with my top plays of the week. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Alright, now up first, we have our top start of the week at quarterback. We're going to go ahead and start Joe Burrow. Now, Joe Burrow has a very favorable matchup this week going against Washington, who rank last versus quarterbacks. They allowed 29 points to Baker Mayfield and 18 points to Daniel Jones, if you can even believe that. He was the QB 10 in week 2 against Kansas City. And since the start of the 2023 season, the Commanders have allowed the most passing yards and touchdowns and have the second least amount of interceptions to quarterbacks. In 2024, Washington has the highest expected points added allowed and the second lowest sack rate, which means that they're not getting to the quarterback, and that's allowing more points to quarterbacks fantasy wise because they don't have that pressure. They can stay calm, cool, and collected in the pocket. So I think that Joe Burrow should thrive here. He's going up against a very bad defense. This is going to be I would say his comeback game, but he was QB 10 last week. But this is going to be his big breakout game of this year. Really struggled in week 1. I don't expect him to struggle here against Washington. He is probably the best quarterback to have this week, in my opinion. So we're going to go ahead and mark him as our quarterback start of the week. All right. Now, up next for our other quarterback of the week, we have Brock Purdy. Now, for a similar reason to Joe Burrow versus the Commanders, as far as sack rate is concerned, Brock Purdy looks in prime position to be successful this week. They rank in the bottom 10 in sack rate. They rank second just behind the Commanders in expected points added. They've allowed the third most points per game to quarterbacks this year with 18.66 and have allowed the third most touchdowns to quarterbacks this year. They're struggling on offense, or they're going to, because they've lost their two best wide receivers, along with they already don't have Higbee, who was their number one tight end. Kyron's been hurt. I expect this to be a 49ers bloodbath. Not to say that the Rams are a bad team by any means, but I do expect that the 49ers should be on offense a lot more. Brock Purdy usually plays decently versus the Rams, and with how many injuries the Rams are going through, I expect the offense of the 49ers to cook. This is going to be Brock Purdy's confidence game, I feel, and I expect him to be within the top 10 this week. All right, now up next we have another quarterback, our last quarterback of the week that we're going to go ahead and tell you to start, and it's going to be Derek Carr. And I have been very critical of Derek Carr because of, his performances the last couple of years, but I think we can all agree that what we've seen from the Saints and from Derek Carr through the first 2 weeks is not the same Saints team that was. Yeah, Derek Carr has been balling out absolutely over these last 2 games. The Saints have scored 91 total points. That's the most by them since 2009, and that was the year that Drew Brees and the Saints won the Super Bowl. That being said, Derek Carr is going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. They've allowed the 9th most points per game to quarterbacks with just under 17. They've also allowed the 3rd most touchdowns to quarterbacks and have allowed the 5th most passing yards in 2024. Derek Carr is currently quarterback 2 through the first 2 weeks with 6 total touchdowns, that being 5 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown to 1 interception, and that interception was just because he was trying to do a little too much. I think, the confidence went over. It was kind of like a heat check. But with that, the Saints, with the former 49ers offensive coordinator who specialized in the play action scheme, the Saints currently lead the league in play action rate with 46.5%, and we can see how successful that has been, especially with a dangerous back like Kamara in the backfield. Derek Carr looks in prime position to show out once again. I expect him to have over 20 again. He's just been firing on all cylinders. This is a perfect week to keep on starting him. All right, next up, the other running back that we have on this list, it's going to be Zach Charbonnet. Now, Zach Charbonnet last week versus the Patriots played 96% of the snaps. In these snaps, he had 14 carries, 32 routes run, 5 targets, and a touchdown. The Dolphins have allowed the sixth most points per game to running backs with 27.85 per game, and they just allowed 28.5 to James Cook last week. With Tua hurt, the game script is asking for the Seahawks to be successful this week versus Miami, and Zach Charbonnet is going to be the focal point of that. I expect Seattle to get out early and not lose that lead because Skylar Thompson, I don't believe, will, you know, go through this Seattle defense by any means. I expect Seattle to stay ahead, and that means that there are going to be carries to be had for Zach Charbonnet. And with Miami's horrible rush defense, he is looking to feast. I expect big things this week from him. All right, now up next we have the running back portion, and we're going to go ahead and start with another 49er, Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason is currently stepping up big in that Christian McCaffrey role because of Christian McCaffrey's injury and going on IR. He has had two very big weeks. He's currently RB7 in fantasy and has had back-to-back 100-yard rushing games. There have been a total of 4 snaps taken by other running backs on this team. He is getting a large volume, a very large volume. The Rams defense has allowed the most expected points added to running backs in 2024 so far. He has 48 rushing attempts over his first 2 weeks. That's tied for first in the NFL with Josh Jacobs. He's currently getting that all that volume, and it's showing. He was RB5 and RB11 in weeks 1 and 2. He is only getting better, and it seems like he's only going to produce more points. Granted, he's not being used very much in the passing game, but he hasn't really needed to be fantasy relevant. Jordan Mason this week versus the Rams, I expect big things from him. He's a must start. Now, for our wide receivers, we have Rashid Shaheed rounding out the top. If we have Derek Carr, you got to have Rashid Shaheed. He has been cooking this year, to a lot of people's surprises and to some not any surprise. Uh, he is in prime position to feast this week with Chris Olave taking over the main cornerback over there, probably Darius Slay. He should have a very good matchup this week. That being said, the Eagles have allowed the second most points per game to wide receivers, and Rashid Shaheed is currently the wide receiver 9 in fantasy. Philadelphia is prone to making big plays happen for other teams as far as receivers are concerned. Darnell Mooney, for example, last week finished with 3 catches for 88 yards, and that big touchdown you saw him kind of rip away from Philadelphia, where he ran it down and scored. Shaheed is averaging over 10 points per game through the first 2 weeks. I'm expecting him to continue. He is going to have some big plays. He doesn't struggle very much getting behind the defender with his speed. I imagine he's going to take advantage of that weak secondary once again, and I expect him to probably produce at least 14 to 15 fantasy points this week if everything goes the way that it should. And up next on the same type of beat, we have Jameson Williams, and it's very exciting to see Jameson Williams finally living up to the expectations that he had. I know that he didn't play very much his first season, and he was, struggling, wasn't really getting any points last season at all when he was playing. So it's very nice to see him kind of step out and become that receiver that everybody thought that he would, and the reason they spent that early first round pick on him. That being said, Jameson Williams has had 2 very strong outings in week 1 and 2. He's the wide receiver 7 in 2024 so far. He's been targeted at least 9 times in both weeks 1 and 2. Amon-Ra St. Brown has not even been targeted that much. Jameson Williams is cooking. He is demanding targets from this offense, and it's very, very good to see. He is the first read on 35% of Jared Goff's throws. He is demanding targets. He leads the Lions in end zone targets with 3 of the 4 total that they've had. It seems like they're starting to trust him a lot more. He's going up against Arizona. Arizona is not a great defense by any means. I expect Jameson Williams to just pop off. He should have a great day this week. He's going to be an absolute beast. Go ahead and start him. All right. Up next and last, we have our tight end starts of the week. We're going to go ahead and start with Kyle Pitts, and I know what everybody's thinking. He's been so disappointing this year so far. I'm not sure exactly why, if it's the offensive scheme, if Kirk Cousins just doesn't want to throw to him. I'm not really sure what's happening right now, but he's not going to have a better week than this to show off what he could potentially do in fantasy. The Chiefs currently give up over 10 more points per game to tight ends than any other team in the league. In week 1, they gave up 9 catches and 111 yards and a touchdown to Likely. And in week 2, even Mike Gesicki got 7 catches for 91 yards. Tight ends versus the Chiefs have been targeted 30 times for 25 catches total and 276 yards. These are all the most in the NFL, and it's pretty much, from what I saw, they've had over 10 more targets, 10 more catches, and over 100 more yards, or just about in all those numbers, more than the next highest team in all of those stat categories. This is going to be his best chance to show what he has, and if he can't get it done here, then I'm okay just sitting him for the rest of the year. I'm not even kidding. Because if they're not going to utilize him against a team that's very susceptible, it seems, to the tight end position, then he has no fantasy relevance. And that's just that. So I'm gonna go ahead, mark Kyle Pitts as a starter this week, and let's see what he does. All right. And last but certainly not least, I feel like this one is almost cheating, but I did feel the need to mention him. I do think that he has the absolute best matchup this week for any tight end, and that's Brock Bowers. Through 2 games this year, Brock Bowers has had 25% target share. That's 1 target total less than Devontae Adams. 26% air yard share. He's number 1 in targets and receptions and yards for tight ends. He's the tight end 2 in fantasy, only behind Isaiah Likely, and that's because Isaiah Likely had that crazy game week 1. And the Panthers allowed the 3rd most points per game up to this point to tight ends, and have allowed the most touchdowns to tight ends, allowing 2 to the Saints in week 1. I think Bowers probably gets into the end zone this week against a very poor Panthers team. I think this is going to be a great fantasy showing for him, and he is going to beast and feast this week. So go ahead. He's the start of the week for the tight end position. And that's going to go ahead and do it for me, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys like this video and you guys want to see more videos like it, make sure you smash that like button. Subscribe if you're new here. Comment. Leave me some questions, ask me about what you should do for your fantasy team, and I'll give you my best recommendations. And I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.